Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, Stan McCune, realtor right here in the Greenville area, and you can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs here in the Greenville area or even outside the Greenville area. I can connect you with our relocations department. And just a reminder, like, rate, review, subscribe to the show if you enjoy it, get anything out of it, want to support it. That's all I ask of you guys. That and that you contact Piper Insurance Group. Their contact info is also in the show notes. They can help you with your home, auto, and umbrella insurance in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. They're independent, meaning that they aren't just stuck to one carrier. They can quote you with multiple different carriers to make sure you get the best possible insurance package for you, and the one that's the cheapest and the most robust. They can help you with investment properties too, fix and flips, ground up new construction, commercial, all of those good things. So please reach out to them today. Even if it's a holiday, when you reach out to them, they will get back with you if they don't answer on the holidays, and they will give you a free quote. So I highly, highly recommend them. Love to support local businesses. They're a local small business right here in Greenville. They can help you out in 3 different states, though, not just here in Greenville, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia. So please reach out to them in the show notes as well. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm recording this on New Year's Eve. And so this show will be released on New Year's Day. Will be interesting to see how many people watch or listen to it on New Year's Day. But I'm sure I'll get some watches and some listens in the preceding days and weeks. But as we round out 2024, enter into 2025, we're going to I'm almost done with kind of my end of year, beginning of year episodes, but today I want to discuss my bold predictions for 2025. We just went over my bold predictions for 2024 and what I got right, what I got wrong. So here we go. Pressure is on. Will I do well with my bold predictions in 2025? I wasn't really happy with my bold predictions in 24. So I want to see some improvement. We need to get better at this, right? Now, 2024 was an extremely challenging year to predict on so many different levels. There were so many things happening. I feel like in some ways I did pretty well, but again, I wasn't satisfied with those results. So hopefully I will do better with this year. And I'm just going to jump right in with the number one question, right? The thing that the entire housing market hinges on right now, mortgage rates. What will happen with regard to mortgage rates in 2025? And here is my bold prediction number one, is that mortgage rates will remain above 6% per Mortgage News Daily for the entire year. Okay? So where do they sit right now? Currently, they sit at 7.06% on Mortgage News Daily. If you go on that website, that's for the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Reminder, as always, that doesn't mean that that's what your rate is. That just means that that's what an aggregator, Mortgage News Daily, has pulled together for a lot of people across the country. The average person with a very good credit score, good history in terms of their credit and in terms of home ownership and all of that, would likely do better than 7.06 today, but that's between you and your lender. They have to tell you that. But my prediction is that we're not going to see rates go below 6%. And that's the only thing I feel confident in saying. I do think that we will see most of the year in the 6% range. Right now we're sitting in the low 7s. I suspect it might get worse before it gets better, but I do think at some point we will see it come back into the 6s, and maybe by the end of the year we're in the low 6s. But if it went into the 5s, I would be truly, truly surprised at this point. It looked like earlier in 2024 that maybe we would see rates start to retreat into the 5s, and that was what a lot of people were predicting, and a lot of people are predicting it'll go into the 5s in 2025. I'm not quite ready to make that prediction yet because we need to see what is going to happen in the Trump economy, right? We need to know, how many tariffs and how restrictive of tariffs is Trump going to impose. And there's debates over whether tariffs are inflationary or not. Well, the debates don't matter that much at the end of the day because what matters more is perception when it comes to mortgage rates, at least. So if the market, if investors, not the real estate market, but the investor market if they believe the tariffs are inflationary, then once Trump, if he imposes big tariffs, what's going to happen is the bond market is going to go wacky, right? People are going to pull money out of the bond market. That's going to send treasury yields soaring, and that's going to cause mortgage rates to go up. If the investor market is kind of looking back at 2018 when Trump imposed his tariffs last time. He didn't do it in 2016, right? So that's another wild card. We don't even know if these tariffs are going to happen this year, because if we look at his blueprint from his last presidency, he waited a couple years before he imposed those tariffs. So that's another thing to consider as well. But long story short, if we look at 2018, the tariffs were not inflationary that Trump imposed, but they also weren't as extreme as he had proposed. And the economy was completely different back then, right? We weren't trying to reduce inflation in 2018. We were comfortable with where inflation was, and the Fed was just trying to figure out what was happening. And they didn't overreact, and it turns out the tariffs didn't end up being inflationary, but they can be, particularly in the short term. Most economists think that they would be. And so here we go. We've got a lot of things in this pot that are all being stirred together, and not the least of which is what the Federal Reserve is going to do. Now, I've said on the show, if you've been listening to past several episodes, Federal Reserve has been cutting rates, but that hasn't caused mortgage rates to come down. And that's because, again, it has more to do with Treasury yields, what's happening on that side, than it does with what the Federal Reserve is doing on the Fed funds rate with regard to what happens with mortgage rates. That being said, the Fed funds rate, and maybe more importantly, what the Fed says, the Fed's statements, their projections, their predictions, all of that, that does indirectly impact all of these things because it impacts investor behavior, which then impacts Treasury yields. Okay, so the Fed is at the they're steering the ship here. Okay, either directly or indirectly, and what they do does have importance, even though their more recent rate cuts have not translated into mortgage rates going down. And the interesting thing right now is Fed Reserve Jay Powell came out with some comments after the most recent rate cut that they made in the month of December. And he said that they are not trying to make any predictions with regard to what the Trump administration is going to do. They are simply focused on data. Well, that's simply not true. And we know that's not true because they revised, as soon as Trump was elected, they revised how many rate cuts they were predicting to make in 2025. And now they're predicting that they're going to make fewer rate cuts in 2025. Well, how does that happen after a president gets elected if you're not projecting that president is going to do things that impact, the economy and where rates need to be and inflation and all of that? Very clearly, they are looking at Trump's proposals and reading the tea leaves there, even though they are in denial about that. Jay Powell is trying really, really hard to not be partisan, but the reality is that we know that the Fed is partisan. You can look at who they donate to, overwhelmingly Democrats. And so even though they've done a pretty good job of not making decisions that would be politically partisan, like trying to wreck the economy when there's a Republican president in office, or trying to really stimulate the economy when there's a Democrat in office. They haven't done that. They're not partisan in that way. But they clearly preferred Biden or Kamala. I think that is clear from the standpoint of their job, predictability, with what the markets are going to do, and with what they will need to do in the future. They strongly preferred that. But long story short, regardless of any of these things, I'm predicting that mortgage rates will not go below 5%, according to Mortgage News Daily. Now, I've had clients get 4 or 5% the past few years by means of various lender programs. So it's not impossible to get much lower than what these standard aggregated rates are. But sometimes you've got to get creative. So let me know if you have questions about that. Happy to answer those. that was the big one, but we've got another big one here, okay? More on a broader level, because, even though this isn't specifically a Greenville real estate, and a lot of these are not going to be Greenville specific, but this one's not even real estate specific, but it's a very important question. I asked the same question last year. It's worth asking again this year. It's kind of a two-part question, right? About the broader economy. Will we have a recession, and will inflation go to 2%, right? The Fed has said they are not going to calm down, bring rates down until inflation settles around 2%. They keep saying that. They keep coming back to that. So what are my predictions here? Well, I predicted that we would have no recession in 2024, and I was right. And I'm predicting, once again, that we will have no recession in 2025. I think that the economy looks fairly strong. I think the potential for a bunch of negative GDP prints is fairly unlikely at this point. Again, a lot hinges on these tariffs and what happens with them. Nobody knows. But I tend to think that if Trump did something that immediately started to cause negative GDP prints, I think he would immediately reverse course or start doing stimulus or something to try to reverse that. So I believe that there will be no recession. Now, as far as inflation goes, that is a much harder thing to predict, okay? I believe, okay, and this is really going out on a limb, I think that we will see inflation return to at or below 2% by the fourth quarter of 2025. And the reason why I believe that, I'm not going to get too in the weeds on this. Again, this is a real estate show. It's not an economic show, and I'm not an economist. But just what I'm seeing in the data, I'm seeing there's a lot of weakness in the underlying economic data that I know the Federal Reserve is seeing and that a lot of other people are seeing, but that weakness hasn't yet shown up yet, okay? Well, I'll just say it that way. But it will, right? I think maybe we've been propped up a little bit by the holidays and various things happening. Hurricane Helene messed up a lot of things. I do think that we'll see some weakness in the economic data, right? Not a recession, but weakness that comes in that then drives inflation down over the course of the year. It might get worse before it gets better, right? We might see inflation start to go up a little bit. Again, tariffs could cause that. We don't know before it comes back down. Now, if you're an educated listener, which I'm not gonna tell you if you are or aren't. I'll let you be the decider of that. But if you're a really educated listener, then you're probably wondering, well, by what metric are you measuring whether we get to 2% inflation or not? If you're on YouTube, you can see I'm sharing from federalreserve.gov a page that says the economy at a glance, inflation in parentheses PCE. This is one personal consumption expenditures price index, one of the main measures of inflation. This is what I'm going to be looking at currently as of November. Obviously, we don't have December yet. I'm recording this at the end of December, so they don't have December's data yet. But as of November, it was sitting at 2.4, which was an increase from 2.1 in September, 2.3 in October, up to 2.4 in November. So we almost, September got to 2.1, so we almost hit 2%. But we've been increasing each month since then, not surprisingly. And I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to increase a little bit before going back down. But it's been really hard to get down to this 2% level. I mean, if you're looking on YouTube, you can see we've been, during the worst of times in June 2022, we were at 7.2%. That was when the Federal Reserve started freaking out, and for good reason. We don't want 7.2% inflation. That's insane. So this will be what I'm tracking as the PCE that needs to go to 2% by the fourth quarter for me to be accurate on this prediction. Number 3, and this is a question that then I will answer in the form of a prediction. Are any more big changes coming to the real estate industry? Okay, specifically in Greenville, but also more broadly. And I just want to say something before I answer this question, and this applies to any of these questions. These are all opinions that I have. They're educated opinions, but they are not official statements. And nothing I'm saying on here is revealing any sort of confidential information that I'm privy to that other people wouldn't have access to. Let me say it that way. So in answering this, I'm not revealing anything that I know from connections that I may or may not have that you may or may not also have. Okay, so don't read into this beyond that. This is just me speculating. I don't have some kind of weird inside track to knowing the answer to this any more so. Maybe I have a little bit more so, but I'm not revealing anything in this answer that is anything confidential that you wouldn't be able to find out just by talking to a few people that know what they're talking about in the industry. Okay. Any big changes coming? Here's what I think. I think it'll be mostly business as usual for 2025 with one exception. I'm quite confident that more paperwork changes are coming from the South Carolina Association of Realtors. We had a lot of paperwork changes in 2024, right? As SCR was trying to adjust on the fly and scramble to accommodate the sudden release of the National Association of Realtors settlement from the Sister Burnett lawsuit. A lot of changes happened, and those were reactionary changes, right? These were, we need to comply now so that we don't get in trouble with get into legal trouble or get into trouble with the NAR. Well, that was reactionary. I think that this year we're going to see more of a forward-looking approach that is saying, okay, everything seems to be working, but maybe a few things could be better. Let's change these things, and let's also think about down the road, what will be the more long-term impacts? What are the trends that we're seeing now from brokerages all across the state, and how can we bake those into our contract paperwork and the various paperwork that we have? So unfortunately, if you're a realtor listening to this, and I know several that do, you're going to have to go to more training for more paperwork. I'm sorry. And if you're someone that bought or sold a home a few years ago, and you're looking at maybe buying or selling a home in 2025, I've got some well, it might not be the worst news for you, but basically anything you think you knew about the contract back then, about the real estate process back then, you're going to have to be brought back up to speed. It's different now, and it's going to continue to be different in 2025. Now, do I think we're going to see major changes with the multiple listing service, major changes with clear cooperation, which is inside baseball talk that I'm not going to get into? I think it's possible, but at the moment, I'm leaning towards no. I'm leaning towards that probably those things are going to more or less, like I said, be business as usual. That the current rules are going to remain the current rules, current structure is going to remain the current structure. And I just think that the biggest thing we're going to run into is on the paperwork side of things, that we're going to see the South Carolina Association of Realtors and perhaps even the local association combined with local brokerages, I think are going to be changing a lot when it comes to paperwork. What about prices in Greenville? Okay, so we track, or on the show, I track with you guys the median price point for Greenville, which is not exactly appreciation or depreciation, but it's the closest metric that we have for tracking it. So again, if you're on YouTube, you can look at our most recent market stats, which was the month of which came out in November, covering, you know what? Actually, I pulled up the wrong ones. Hold on, give me 1 second here. It would be good if I pulled up the right thing here. Well, you know what? It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this episode. Basically, we have now had multiple straight months, and I already discussed this with you guys. We've had 3 straight months of negative appreciation, or what you would possibly call depreciation. Now, again, we have to be careful with how we word this, how we say this, because when we're looking at the median price point, we're not exactly precisely looking at appreciation or depreciation. It is that, right? It does track that. So like when we were seeing insane appreciation during, and I apologize for that. I finally pulled it up. For some reason, my computer did not want to find the most recent market stats. So I'm pulling that back up if you're on YouTube to give you something to look at besides my lovely face. When we were seeing insane appreciation back in 2020, 21, first half of 2022, the median sales price was taking off, right? And if you want to look back at the great financial crisis, 2007 through roughly 2012, you see that was also reflected in the median sales price. So what you don't want to do is to overreact too strongly to month-on-month trends for this. But once you start to see a pattern, that's when it starts to become something that's noteworthy, right? So we now have a pattern of 3 straight months where the year-on-year percent change is in the negatives for the median price point. That very well could indicate a depreciating environment. I would like to see a little bit more data before I come to that conclusion. 3 months, small sample size, right? That's 1 quarter. I'd like to see a little bit more before concluding that we are in a depreciating market here in Greenville specifically. But that's what's happening currently. But here's what I'm thinking is going to happen with regard to the median sales price for the year 2025. I think it's going to be between -1% and 2% for the year, as opposed to 2024. So I don't yet know what the final median sales price is for 2024. You'll have to tune in with me in a few weeks whenever the December market stats get published so that we can talk about that. November was sitting at 305,000 was what November was sitting at. I'd be surprised if December doesn't jump up a little bit from that number. But basically, we're going to be needing to see prices in order to get better than that. We're going to need to see prices, go up into the 310s or something like that to hit, around that 2% number. But I'm also saying, like I said, I'm doing a range here. Last year I did a range between 0 and 3%. This year I'm dialing that back a little bit to -1% to 2%. We might see a year of prices getting better for buyers. We might see a year of prices staying slightly stable, getting a little bit better for sellers. But 2% appreciation, if we think about this specifically as appreciation, that's almost not even noticeable, right? Like that's very, very basic, very, very steady. And here's why you don't want to. Another reason why the median sales price isn't a perfect measure. It's a good measure of appreciation or depreciation, but it's not perfect. Again, you can have a builder that sells off a bunch of homes all at the same time that really skews the stats for 1 month. Or you could have an investor liquidate a bunch of really bad rental properties. We had this happen in Gaffney a few years ago. Bunch of unlivable. I mean, these places stunk. I showed a bunch of them. These apartments, they were awful. Sold off several hundred apartments in Gaffney. And that kind of stuff, you sell off a bunch of apartments for $30,000 a pop because they're unlivable. That skews these stats. So these are the sorts of things this is why I don't base anything off of 1 month here, 1 month here. I want to see a trend line. And right now the trend line is not super positive if you're a seller. Great if you're a buyer. But I think that it's going to be a year of very minimal, if any, appreciation is kind of the long story short. And by the end of the year, we'll see if we're around between minus 1% and 2% appreciation. That would put us right in line with what 2024 was. So if you're wondering what will 2025 be like in terms of prices, I'm predicting it'll be pretty comparable to 2024. All right, number 5 here. And I've got 10 of these, by the way, in case you're wondering. Number 5 out of 10. Will membership in the Greater Greenville Association of Realtors go up or down? All right. Now, this is probably more interesting to realtors than non-realtors listening to the show. But if you're a non-realtor, it should be interesting to you as well. Some of you guys might want to become realtors. We hear a lot. There's too many realtors in Greenville. And in a lot of ways, that can be true, right? There's too many bad realtors in Greenville, okay? If they were all good, we wouldn't say there's too many of them. But the problem is there's too many, and this isn't a Greenville phenomenon. It's just a nationwide phenomenon. It doesn't matter how much we try to improve our training or anything like that. There's always going to be people that are bad at what they do. It's just the reality of the situation. I'm not trying to be pompous here. But long story short, this is a big question of now that we've had all of these different changes that have happened the past year with realtor compensation and all these different forms, and now there's so many more hoops that we have to go through. Is membership going to go up or down? And it's been a long time since it's gone down, but I do in fact think that it will go down in 2025. I think we'll see a decrease in membership. At the moment, according to the multiple listing service, I pulled some numbers that would indicate that our current membership is 5,090. All right, so I'm going to predict that number is going to be below 5,000 by the end of 2025. We'll see. Well, you know what? I'm not going to say. I'm just going to say it's going to be below 5,090 because if I say that 5,000 number, that's going to confuse me later when I come back and review these. So let's just say it's just going to be below 5,090. It's going to be below what it is today. Moving right along here. Number 6, inventory or supply. Will inventory go up or down? Here is what I think, and I'm gonna go ahead and pull up again for those looking on YouTube. I'm gonna pull up the inventory, the most recent inventory numbers for you guys to be able to look at here. Inventory in Greenville has been quite high this year. It's at a pretty high number at the moment. It's comparable to 2015. Interestingly, that's not reflected in the entire state of South Carolina. That's not everywhere here. If you look at numbers for the entire state of South Carolina, actually the state as a whole has less inventory than it did in 2019. So Greenville has a lot more inventory than most of South Carolina, which is a good thing in my opinion. We needed more inventory. It's bad the way it happened though. It happened more not because of a lot more building to basically give all the demand options. The reason why we're having the spike in inventory, it's more of a demand story than a supply story. We haven't had increased supply in terms of increased units being built as much as we should have, so much as we've just had decreased demand, right? So Greenville, the reason why Greenville has been impacted more so than other parts of the state is that Greenville, a major appeal of Greenville is cost of living. So when you've got the cost of living being so much higher, and we look at the housing affordability index, it's not been great for quite some time now, and a lot of that is mortgage rates. Mortgage rates really hurts Greenville more so than other markets because Greenville is a market driven by affordability on many levels. So what am I predicting for supply, for inventory? Will go up and down. I think we're going to continue to see month-on-month increases in supply in inventory until February or March. Probably that the increases will continue until March, but somewhere in that time frame, somewhere the increases will continue through the first quarter, and then at some point, either in or after the first quarter, the month-on-month increases in supply will stop, but the year-on-year increases will continue until June or July. Okay, what do I mean by all this? So here's what we've had so far. Month-on-month increases. We have had well, the entire year of 2024, every single month had more inventory than the month prior. Okay. And the way this works is basically it's just they look at what are the number of active homes for sale at the end of the month. That's it. Every single month at the end of it has had more active inventory than the month prior for the entire month of 2024. Now, we don't yet have the final numbers for December, but I'm going to look at this real quick just in the multiple listing service to just see what it says. And for whatever reason, it's never the same. I can never get the same numbers as the Greater Greenville Association of Realtors does. And I'm not entirely sure why. Let me try another thing. Okay. So if I just look at multi-class, which is basically anything and everything, I come up with 5,411 units, which would be substantially up. That's not right. I don't know. We're going to have to wait until we get the Greater Greenville Association numbers. I don't know if December is going to be up or down from November. But long story short, I think we're going to see month-on-month increases. January is going to be higher than December. February is going to be higher than January. And then possibly March will be higher than February. And then we're going to start see decreases. And the reason why I think we're going to start seeing decreases month-on-month is that there's going to be more demand coming into the market. A lot of pent-up demand, I think, will come into the market in the spring. I'm seeing some indicators of that anecdotally. And it just makes sense to me as well on a high level. But as far as year-on-year increases, I think we're going to continue to see year-on-year increases until probably the summer. And that's what I'm saying, June or July. So when we're comparing 25 to 24, typically we're looking at, okay, what is, March of 25? How does that compare to March of 24? How does April of 25 compare to April of 24? And I think those comparisons, we're going to see inventory be higher and higher and higher year on year until we get to June or July. And then I think we're going to start seeing in or after those months, we're going to start seeing that the year on year numbers are lower for 25 versus 24. And I'm manifesting that because I think that probably mortgage rates will be lower year on year during that period of time. Okay, number 7, pending sales. Okay, so we just talked about we just talked about supply. Now we're going to talk about demand, which is pending sales. And I'm going to pull this up if I can ever find it. For those of you on YouTube, pending sales, will they continue to increase? Now, if you're looking on YouTube, don't look at November. It looks like a big decrease. That's the wrong number. It's always it's always wrong for the most recent month, and then they revise it and it goes way up. But you can see, besides that month, every month has been an increase year on year. So the question is whether that will continue. Are we going to continue to see pending sales increases year on year for each month in 2025? And I am going to predict that yes, we will see pending sales increase year on year for every month. We won't have a single month in 2025 with a decrease in pending sales. That's my prediction. And the reason for that prediction is I think that more inventory should mean more pendings, right? There's more options for people, so they're going to be more likely to buy. Prices being stable, people aren't going to be, as priced out. Hopefully people's wages go up while mortgage rates come down a little, while home prices either stay where they are or go down a little as well. So that should give people more purchasing power, and hopefully more demand will trickle into the market as a result of all of these things, combined with just people being forced to move, right? All these people that have been waiting now since 2022 and waiting for rates to go down, waiting for things to get more affordable. That hasn't really happened, but maybe their wages have improved to the point where now it's like, okay, now we can finally do it. Now we can finally make that move. So I think we're going to see a strong year of pending sales is what I'm predicting for 2025. Number 8. Let's think about for a second, cash transactions versus financing. I'm going to be talking about this a little bit next week's episode as well to discuss what exactly is happening on this front. But I think we're going to see cash transactions be between 21 to 23% of closings for the year 2025. If that sounds really high, that over a fifth of homes sold in Greenville would be bought with cash, just know that it's looking like once all the data comes in from 2024, that it's actually going to be higher than 23%. So I'm actually predicting that cash transactions will go down a little bit, again, as a result of mortgage rates perhaps being a little bit more affordable. But I still think that we'll see strong cash transaction, 21 to 23%. That's still really strong, right? Almost a quarter of transactions being bought with cash. During the height of all the chaos with COVID, it was right around a quarter. And that wasn't because mortgage rates were what they were. That was just because everyone was trying to enter the market. Everyone was going crazy. There was just a lot of cash buyers that were outbidding everyone else. Now the cash that's in the market is mostly just because people can't afford mortgages, and so they're left with either cash buyers that are out there or cash buyers that perhaps like parents helping their kids by buying cash on behalf of their kids, then maybe setting up some kind of program for their kids to pay them back, or maybe not. Maybe the parents are just helping the kids out, which I am always in favor of, because I think that the current generation is going to be unable to purchase a home until their mid to late 30s. And I think that they do need help from the parents in one form or another in order to get that foundation that they need in order to be able to build on, right? Just like, my generation, our parents had to help us with college tuition, right? That was how they helped us in many ways. Well, I think my generation, we're probably going to be helping our kids purchase homes, and that's going to be a big part of it. I will not be. I should be careful what I say here. I'm not encouraging college debt on my kids at all. I think it's a terrible idea. But I think debt in real estate, something that you actually tangibly benefit from, actually use and need from day one, a little bit different. I'm much more willing to help my kids out with something like that than going out and getting a psychology degree that will never pay itself off. That's a whole rabbit trail. I'll probably just offended a bunch of people. Sorry. Happy New Year. All right, number 9 here. Will Greenville County continue to make onerous restrictions on development? I worded that with a little bit of teeth, and I am going to predict yes, Greenville County is going to continue to restrict development, put more onerous standards, more onerous restrictions on developers, and just on standard people. Just, and people think of developers, they think of these big companies like Meritage and D.R. Horton and companies like that. The county doesn't care whether you're a massive national developer or a small-time local developer. They don't want you building right now. And guess what? We've had a lot of turnover in the county council the past year. I've talked about that a little bit on the show, and none of it is good for development. There's not one person on there that's pro-housing in the entire group. In fact, on county council, one of the least pro-housing people is someone who is a licensed realtor. And that's not uncommon. And you know what? I can understand realtors being against development, right? It actually, in many ways, can hurt us as realtors. When there's more development that's happening, it's a lot easier in our local real estate market if we just don't build anymore, right? And we're just living with what we already have. But regardless, if you guys have listened to the show very much, you know that I'm pro-development because I think it's the best thing for Greenville. I don't care inherently about my bottom line. I think if Greenville continues to get better, my bottom line will take care of itself, right? So I'm not approaching this from a scarcity mindset, approaching this from an abundance mindset, and I think that everyone else should do that as well. But long story short, I'm not sure what new restrictions are going to come down from county council beyond what they've already proposed. But I think that there's going to be some proposals and some things that pass this year that are going to add some onerous restrictions to development. I'm just going to leave it at that. And we'll come back and we'll see if they've been able to do that, by the time we get to the end of the year here. The thing that could prevent them from doing that would just be trying to get consensus, right? Right now, it's going to be a very fractured county council. So there's going to be alliances that need to be made, and there's going to be a lot of things that that are hotly debated and that they're not going to be able to get a majority on. We've got a 12-person county council. There's going to be 6-6 votes. There's going to be a lot of 6-6 votes. There's going to be a lot of 5-7s. There's already been a lot of 8-4s and 4-8s. But now with the new council coming in, it's going to be a lot of 6-6s and a lot of 5-7s. So you need to be prepared for that. And we'll see how this impacts everything else. Number 10, last but not least, will sellers stop paying buyer agents in 2025? Okay, this is, if you're a realtor, you're really plugged in for this one, right? If you're not a realtor, maybe you don't know, but this is where there were changes from the National Association of Realtors that lost a lawsuit, the Sitzer Burnett lawsuit. Now there's been changes in terms of how buyer agents can be compensated. That compensation can no longer be advertised in any way associated with the multiple listing service. But buyer agents can still be compensated. And so far, they are still being compensated. Now, I'm not allowed to discuss amounts, commissions, percentages, anything like that. Very strict rule. Don't discuss those things. I did at one point. I don't anymore because I've learned that that's a no-no. But I can tell you, without getting into those sorts of specifics, buyer's agents are still getting paid. They're still getting paid because sellers realize that buyer agents have value, and they realize that most buyers have buyer agents and want buyer agents. And so the end result of that has been that sellers wanting to sell their homes, particularly right now with a slower market, they realize they've got to pony up some money for buyer's agents. Now, what's different is that it used to be that the seller paid the listing agent the entire commission amount for both agents. And then it was the listing agent that split that commission, maybe 50-50, maybe 40-60. Different agents and brokerages had different models. But they would split part of that commission, usually about half, with the buyer agent that brought the buyer, right? And that was a pretty fair arrangement. Well, the Department of Justice doesn't like that. They don't think that sellers should have to be on the hook automatically for subsidizing a buyer agent for whatever amount. So what's changing now? What has changed is that now we have to communicate. If I have a buyer client that's interested in a home, I have to communicate because it can't be publicly listed anymore. I have to communicate with the listing agent on what percentage commission is being or what amount of commission is being offered to a buyer agent. And the second question that a lot of agents are forgetting to ask right now is that coming directly from the seller or is that coming from the listing brokerage? Okay, that's important for a variety of reasons, which I'm not going to get into the weeds on here. But I'm just going to say this, that most likely by the end of 2025, I think pretty much all the major brokerages in South Carolina are going to make this strictly between seller and buyer as negotiated by the buyer agent and the listing agent. Okay, what do I mean by that? It's going to be when the seller agrees to list their house with the listing agent, the commission offered is going to be for the listing agent only. No commission offered to a buyer agent. And then when a buyer comes along with a buyer agent and the buyer agent says, hey, are you offering a commission? That's going to be then something that the seller has to agree directly with the buyer. Of course, the agents will be the ones that will be negotiating that, presenting that, and all of that. But long story short, it will be a separate agreement. We've already been doing this. C. Dan Joyner, my company, my team, the Morgan Group, we've been doing this already for months now because this policy was rolled out a long time ago, but a lot of brokerages aren't. And I think that by the end of the year, we're going to see this, that brokerages are going to make it, they don't pass through the buyer. The buyer agent commission never flows through the listing brokerage at all. It just ends up being something that the seller pays the buyer agent directly at closing. And I think that by the end of 2025, that all major brokerages in South Carolina are going to be using that system versus the old system where it flowed through the listing brokerages. But to my broader prediction, there's no way for me to track that and to tell you for sure whether that's the case. So that's a prediction, but that's not a prediction that I'm going to attempt to verify whether it's accurate or not. The prediction that I am going to hang my hat on is that I believe buyer agents are still going to get paid, and I don't believe that they're going to see any meaningful reduction in how much they get paid, okay? That the Department of Justice might call that price fixing. That's because they don't understand the economy. And that's just not how anything works. Look at any job in the world, there is set pay, right? If you're a doctor, you kind of know, or if you're trying to become a doctor, some sort of doctor, a primary care physician, we'll just say, if you're trying to become a primary care physician or a nurse practitioner, you can basically figure out what that would equate to in terms of a salary, right? But apparently realtors aren't allowed to do that. That's price fixing. That's ridiculous. I have a big problem with that with the Department of Justice, but whatever, neither here nor there. The more important thing is that sellers are smarter than the Department of Justice, and they understand that buyer agents need to be paid or else they'll just go away. And if buyer agents go away, that's a big problem. I already talked about that. I'm not going to beat that dead horse any more than it's already been beaten. But my prediction is that buyer agents will continue to get paid, and that it's going to be a big nothing burger. Those that are freaking out about, that they're gonna all lose their jobs. I don't think it's going to happen. And so there you go. Rates, run down real quick. Rates are going to remain above 6% for the entire year per Mortgage News Daily. And there will be no recession, and inflation will return to at or below 2% by the fourth quarter. There won't be any major impacts on the industry outside of contracts, paperwork. I think we'll see some changes there. In terms of appreciation or depreciation, I think we'll see the median price for real estate in Greenville go between minus 1%, which would be a 1% decrease, or a 2% increase for the year once it's all said and done. I think membership in GJR is going to go down. I think the inventory is going to see month-on-month increases for the first quarter, and then probably by the end of the second quarter, perhaps early third quarter, we will see the year-on-year increases finally stop. Pending sales, I think, will continue to increase for every month in the year of 2025. I think we'll see 21 to 23% of closings be cash versus financing. I think Greenville County is going to sneak in some kind of new onerous restrictions on development. And I think that sellers will continue to pay buyer agents because they see the value of buyer agents. Those are my predictions for 2025. I'm ready for the new year. I hope you guys are too. I'm going to party tonight. It's going to be great. And I'm looking forward to providing you guys a bunch of content this new year. So please tune in, like, rate, review, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. My contact info in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. Piper Insurance in the show notes for a free quote. Reach out to them today. We will talk again next time.